I didn't notice the moment it shifted. That's the honest part. It didn't start with flirting. It didn't even start with her. It started with an email. 11:47 p.m. A parent complaint. Long overwritten. The kind that uses words like concerned about professionalism. I stared at my laptop in my apartment kitchen, the fridge humming too loudly behind me. I drafted 3 different responses. Deleted them all. Finally, I forwarded it to her. I might have mishandled this. I regretted sending that immediately. She replied at 12:03 a.m. Come by my office before first period. We'll handle it. No emoji. No softening. Just direct. The next morning, I stopped at the small coffee shop across from the school. I always do. Same corner. Same chipped wooden table. I check my phone even when there's nothing to check. It's a habit I picked up after my last relationship ended. Like maybe someone might change their mind overnight. No one ever does. The barista handed me my cup without asking. Large. No sugar. I nodded. Yeah. I almost texted someone I don't talk to anymore. Typed half a sentence. Deleted it. Slid the phone face down. I don't know why I was nervous. She was just the vice principal. 42. Divorced, someone told me. Composed in that way that makes you stand straighter without realizing it. Still, when I walked into the school, I checked my reflection in the glass door. Her office always smelled faintly like cinnamon. I think it was the thermos she kept on her desk, stainless steel, slightly dented near the lid. She poured from it into a ceramic cup when I came in, like she'd been expecting me for a while. Morning, she said without looking up. Morning. I stood there a second too long before sitting. I hate that about myself, the pause, the not knowing where to put my hands. I folded the edge of a napkin from my coffee sleeve over and over until it tore. She skimmed the email, quiet. Her brow tightened, but not at me, just at the screen. You didn't mishandle it, she said finally. You're new. Parents test that. Oh, I nodded. Right. Silence settled, but it wasn't awkward exactly. More like deliberate. She looked at me then, properly looked, and I felt it land. Not heavy, just steady. You care, she added. That's obvious. I shrugged, because what do you say to that? I flicked my eyes toward her hands instead, the way her thumb traced the rim of her cup before she lifted it. No ring. I noticed that and immediately wished I hadn't. She caught me looking, not at her hand specifically, just looking. You'll get used to the emails, she said, almost amused. Is that supposed to be comforting? A little. There was the smallest smile. Not wide. Just there and gone. After that, I found reasons to stop by. Questions I could have solved on my own. Schedule clarifications. Policy things. She never rushed me out. She'd lean back in her chair, arms crossed loosely, listening like what I said mattered more than it probably did. One afternoon, as I stood to leave, she said, You drink the same coffee every day. I paused. You noticed. You fold the sleeve when you're thinking, she replied, nodding toward the shredded cardboard in my hand. I hadn't realized I was doing it again. Guess I do, I said. She tilted her head slightly. You don't have to be nervous in here. I'm not nervous. That soft disbelief did something to me. Not embarrassing. Not flattering either. Just seen. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my phone again. No new messages. I scrolled through old conversations I should have deleted months ago. Then her name lit up my screen. I sat up straighter without meaning to. A single text. Are you still awake? It was 11:52 p.m. And that's when I realized, maybe this wasn't about parent emails anymore. She didn't usually text that late. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Yeah, I'm up, I typed back. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then disappeared. Then came back. I was rereading that email. I think I was too blunt in my response draft. Can I run something by you? That was the excuse. We both knew it was. I offered to call. She said no. Just come by tomorrow morning before the halls filled up. The next day, her office felt smaller somehow. She had her thermos open again, steam rising in thin threads. There were 2 cups this time. I didn't know how you'd take it, she said, sliding one toward me. So I guessed. I took a sip. No sugar. Just a little milk. It's right, I said. She gave a short nod like that mattered more than it should. We went over the email, line by line. Our chairs angled closer than usual. At one point, she leaned over my shoulder to look at the screen instead of pulling it toward her. I could feel the warmth of her arm near mine. Not touching, just close enough to register. Parents like to feel heard, she said quietly, even when they're wrong. Do you always know how to say the right thing? She almost laughed. No, I just know how much it costs when you don't. That hung there. I glanced at her. That sounds specific. She hesitated, fingers resting on the edge of the desk. For a second, I thought she'd brush it off. Instead, she leaned back. My ex-husband used to say I corrected him like a student, she said. Matter of fact. No bitterness in her tone. I thought I was helping. Turns out I was just exhausting. I didn't know what to do with that. So I was honest. I talk too much when I'm nervous, I said. Or I shut down completely. Depends on the day. She studied me like I'd handed her something fragile. You don't seem nervous right now. I was. Just not in the way she meant. It became a pattern after that. I'd stop by under the pretense of work, and we'd drift a little off script. 5 minutes about schedules would turn into 10 about books, then somehow into her telling me she once wanted to teach literature instead of going into administration. I liked being in the middle of the mess, she said. Now I just clean it up. You could still go back. She smiled at that, but it didn't reach her eyes. At 42, I think I've already picked my version of things. There it was, the number. Not heavy, just real. I felt it then, the outline of what this was. 26 and temporary. She was established. Known. People respected her. There were teachers my age who still whispered when she walked by. I imagined someone noticing how often I was in her office. I imagined the story writing itself without our permission. And still, I kept showing up. One afternoon, the power flickered during a storm. The halls emptied early. Rain pressed against the windows in thick sheets. We sat there in the dim light, not talking, just listening to the building breathe around us. You should go, she said eventually, before it gets worse. Yeah. I didn't move. Neither did she. Her hand rested near mine on the desk, close enough that the space between felt intentional. I watched her fingers tap once, twice, like she was deciding something. Then, casually, almost absent-mindedly, she reached over and brushed a crease from my sleeve. Your cuffs folded, she said softly. It was nothing. It was everything. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. After the cuff thing, I told myself to calm down. It was a small gesture. She would have done that for anyone. I repeated that all week. Still, something had shifted. Not louder, just closer. I started timing my visits to her office less carefully. Before lunch. After last period. Once, just because I happened to be passing by. I wasn't subtle. I knew that. I think she did too. Then Mr. Hadi from the math department raised an eyebrow when he saw me stepping out of her office. You switching careers, he joked. Just paperwork, I said too quickly. He hummed like he didn't fully believe me. That was the first crack. Not in us, in the air around us. The next time I stopped by, her door was half closed. She looked up when I knocked, and something in her expression tightened. Not cold, just measured. You don't have a class right now, she asked. No. Free period. She nodded slowly. Right. I stayed standing this time instead of sitting automatically. I didn't know why. Maybe because she didn't tell me to sit. I can come back, I said. It's fine. A pause. What did you need? That word, need, felt pointed. Nothing urgent. Just wanted to ask about the reading list for next term. She gestured to the chair then, but the warmth from before was muted. Professional. Clean edges. We talked about curriculum. Safe. Structured. I watched her hands instead of her face. The way she aligned the stack of papers on her desk until they were perfectly square. She does that when she's thinking, or when she's holding something in. Halfway through, there was a knock and the door opened without waiting. It was Aisha from the front office. Oh, sorry, she said, glancing between us. Didn't realize you were in a meeting. We weren't. Not really. It's fine, she added quickly, but her eyes lingered a second too long before she handed over a folder and left. The silence after felt different. Exposed. She leaned back in her chair. You should be careful. About what? She held my gaze then, steady and unreadable. About how things look. I swallowed. Is that what this looks like? Her jaw tightened just slightly. I don't know what this is supposed to look like. There it was. The first honest thing either of us had said about it. I imagined, briefly, what would happen if I reached across the desk. If I just closed the distance. The thought came fast and left faster. Reckless. Stupid. She stood up abruptly and walked to the window, folding her arms. Rain streaked the glass again, softer than last time. You're 26, she said quietly. Not judgmental. Just factual. And you're 42. I replied before I could stop myself. She exhaled through her nose. Almost a laugh. Almost not. This isn't, she started, then stopped. I stepped closer without meaning to. Not touching. Just within reach. What isn't it? I asked softer now. She turned back toward me. We were closer than we'd ever been. I could see the faint crease between her brows, the way her eyes flicked down to my mouth and then back up like she'd caught herself. Her hand lifted slightly, like she might push me back. It didn't. For a second, one suspended, fragile second, neither of us moved. And I think if one of us had said anything at all, we would have crossed it. It shifted again the day I saw her laughing with someone else. It was nothing. That's the worst part. School had emptied for the afternoon. I'd stayed late to finish grading, then walked past the parking lot on my way out. She was standing near her car with Mr. Hadi, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair slightly loosened from its usual clip. He said something I couldn't hear. She laughed, not the polite half-smile she gives in meetings. A real laugh. Head tipped back a little. I slowed down without meaning to. Jealousy is an ugly thing when you haven't earned the right to feel it. I told myself I was being ridiculous. She's allowed to laugh. She's allowed to have history, friends, men her own age who make sense on paper. Still, I didn't sleep well that night. The next evening, there was a school fundraiser meeting that ran longer than it should have. By the time we left, the campus was dim and quiet. She was walking ahead of me toward the gate. You parked far, I said. So did you. We ended up walking side by side down the sidewalk without planning to. The air was cool. Not cold. Just enough to make you aware of it. You seemed busy yesterday, I said, aiming for neutral. She glanced at me. Yesterday. In the parking lot. With Hadi. I nodded, hating how small that felt. She was quiet for a few steps. He was telling me about his daughter's science project. Oh. Another pause. You don't have to monitor who I talk to, she said gently. I'm not. You are. It wasn't accusing. Just observant. That almost made it worse. I shoved my hands into my pockets. I stopped. Started again. I don't know what this is supposed to be. She exhaled slowly. We reached a bench near the gate, the kind parents sit on during pickup. She sat down. I stayed standing for a second, then joined her. The streetlight above us flickered faintly. This, she said, looking straight ahead, is exactly the kind of thing I can't afford. Her voice wasn't cold. It was tired. I didn't ask you to afford anything, I replied. That's the problem. The space between us felt charged again. Not like before, softer, but heavier. I was married for 15 years, she said suddenly. Do you know what it's like to rebuild your reputation after something ends? To have people look at you like they're waiting for the next mistake. I shook my head. I can't be someone's experiment. She swallowed on the last word. That hit harder than I expected. I'm not experimenting, I said quietly. I don't even know how to do that. She looked at me then, really looked. Searching for something. You're 26, she repeated, but this time it sounded less like a fact and more like a fear. And I don't feel 26 when I'm with you. The words slipped out before I could edit them. Her breath caught. Just slightly. You make me feel, I hesitated. Honest or safe. Steady. That did it. I saw the wall shift. She reached up, almost unconsciously, and touched my jaw. Light. Testing. Like she was confirming I was real. My heart was loud enough I was sure she could hear it. We shouldn't, she whispered. But she didn't move her hand. And I didn't lean away. The question hung there between us, fragile and impossible to ignore. If we closed this distance, what would it cost? The next morning, her door was open. That should have meant nothing. It meant everything. She never leaves it open. I stood there longer than I needed to, watching her from the hallway. She was at her desk, posture straight, hair pinned tighter than usual. The thermos was there. The papers were aligned. The room looked exactly the same, except it didn't. I knocked lightly. She glanced up, polite smile already in place. Yes. Yes. Not come in. Not my name. Just yes. I almost said we should talk. Instead, I needed the updated attendance sheets. They're in the shared drive, she replied, already looking back at her screen. Oh, right. I didn't move. She felt it. I know she did. But she didn't look up again. That was the first time I understood what pulling away looks like when it's done carefully. By lunch, it was obvious. She didn't stop by my classroom like she sometimes did under the excuse of observations. She didn't text. She didn't even glance down the hallway when I passed the admin office. It was clinical, professional, perfect, and I hated how easily she could do it. 2 days later, I found out why. I was in the copy room when Aisha mentioned it casually. Her son's visiting this week, she said, sorting papers. From university. First time since the divorce. I froze. She has a son. Yeah. 19, I think. 19. The number sat in my chest like something misplaced. I did the math without wanting to. She was 23 when she had him. Younger than I am now. I tried to picture her at my age, exhausted, responsible for someone else's entire life. While I was still figuring out how to cook anything beyond pasta, it rearranged something inside me. That afternoon, I saw them together. He was tall, confident in that careless way 19-year-olds are. He carried her thermos while she locked the office door. She laughed at something he said and nudged his shoulder lightly. The gesture was soft, familiar. I shouldn't have been there watching. She looked up and saw me. For a second, everything flickered across her face. Surprise, something warmer, then the quick recalibration. Mr. Rahim, she said formally. This is my son, Denial. I shook his hand. Nice to meet you. You too, he said easily. Mom talks about school nonstop. Mom. The word did something I didn't expect. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even shame. It was perspective. After that, I stopped going to her office. Not dramatically. I just didn't. I answered emails through official channels. I stayed in my classroom during free periods. I left right after the last bell. I told myself I was giving her space. Truth was, I didn't know where I fit in the version of her life that included a 19-year-old son and a reputation stitched back together after 15 years of marriage. One night, I typed out a message. I'm not trying to complicate your life. Deleted. I miss talking to you. Deleted. Was any of it real? That one stayed on the screen the longest. My thumb hovered over send. Then the screen went dark. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was a Thursday when she showed up at my apartment. No warning. No text. I almost didn't open the door. I thought it might be a delivery I forgot about. Or a neighbor. But when I pulled it open, she was standing there with her hands tucked into the pockets of her coat, like she'd been standing that way for a while. Hi, she said. Not formal. Not distant. Just her. For a second, I forgot how to speak. You found my address. It's in your employment file, she replied. Then, softer, I wouldn't have come if it wasn't necessary. That stung more than I expected. I stepped aside anyway. Do you want tea? She nodded. My kitchen is small. Too small for tension like this. I filled the kettle just to have something to do with my hands. She stood near the counter, looking around like she was memorizing details. The stack of unwashed dishes, the single chair pulled slightly away from the table, my phone face down beside it. You stopped coming by, she said finally. You asked me to be careful. I asked you to understand the risk. I let out a quiet breath. I do now. The kettle clicked off. I poured the water slower than necessary. She didn't sit. Neither did I. My son leaves Sunday, she said. When he's here, I remember the version of myself that made safe decisions. That chose stability. And I'm not stable. I asked, not defensive, just needing clarity. She looked at me then. Really looked. You're young, she said. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean you still get to change your mind without it costing you everything. I leaned back against the counter. You think this is a phase. I think it's intense. A pause. And intensity fades. That's not what this feels like. Silence stretched between us. Not angry. Just heavy with what we hadn't allowed ourselves to say. I didn't stop coming by because I lost interest, I said quietly. I stopped because I didn't know how to stand next to your real life without feeling like I was trespassing. Her shoulders softened at that. Just slightly. You're not trespassing, she said. You're just unexpected. A small, sad smile. I took a step closer. Not reckless. Measured. I don't need you to promise anything, I said. I don't need forever. I just need to know I'm not imagining this. Her eyes flickered, that familiar internal calculation. Reputation. Age. Her son. The staff. The version of herself she worked hard to rebuild. Then she did something I didn't expect. She reached for my hand. Not my face. Not dramatic. Just my hand. Her fingers wrapped around mine, warm and steady. She held it like she was testing the weight of it. You're not imagining it, she said. The honesty in her voice cost her something. I could hear it. I swallowed. Okay. That was it. Not a declaration. Not a plan. Just okay. Her thumb brushed once across my knuckles, absent-minded. Almost. And she let out a slow breath like she'd been holding it for weeks. We'll have to be careful, she said. I know. Another pause. She didn't pull away. And neither did I. We didn't tell anyone. Not at first. The next Monday, I still walked into school at 8:47 a.m., the same time I always did. The hallway lights still hummed. Parents still sent emails too late at night. Nothing dramatic shifted. But something settled. I stopped lingering outside her office like I didn't belong there. If the door was open, I knocked. If it was closed, I waited. We learned the rhythm of discretion, not secrecy laced with shame, just care. At work, she was still composed. Still vice principal. Still measured in meetings. But sometimes, when no one was looking, she'd pass by my classroom and let her fingers brush the edge of my desk. Quick. Subtle. Enough. We started meeting outside of school in small ways. A quiet tea place 3 streets from my apartment. Evening walks that didn't look like dates. Conversations that had nothing to do with curriculum or parent complaints. She told me more about her marriage one night, sitting across from me with her thermos between us like a third presence. I built my whole adult life around being needed, she said. Wife, mother, administrator. I forgot what it felt like to be wanted. You are, I said. She held my gaze for a long second. I know. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't breathless. It was steady. Her son went back to university that Sunday. I didn't ask how the goodbye felt. She didn't offer details. But that evening, she texted me first. Are you still awake? I smiled at the screen. Yeah. Some patterns don't fade. They deepen. Weeks passed. Then months. There were hard days. Whispers we pretended not to hear. Moments where the age gap felt visible in practical ways. Her back aching after long meetings, me still restless at midnight. We didn't romanticize that part. But we talked. On a bench near the school gate. The same one where we almost crossed a line. She leaned her head lightly against my shoulder one evening. I used to think intensity was the point, she said. And now I think it's consistency. I nodded. That felt right. I still fold my coffee sleeves when I'm thinking. She still notices. Sometimes she reaches over and flattens it against the table without saying anything. We never had a dramatic confession. No one ran through rain. There wasn't a single moment where everything changed. It was smaller than that. It was her keeping a second mug in her kitchen cabinet without announcing why. It was me learning how she takes her tea and getting it right without asking. It was choosing, over and over, not to retreat. One evening, months later, we were back in her kitchen. Dishes drying. Window cracked open. Ordinary life happening around us. She looked at me across the counter and said, "You know this wasn't supposed to happen." I smiled. I know. And yet, I repeated. She reached for my hand the same way she had that first night in my apartment. Steady, certain now. No testing the weight of it. She already knew. I don't think love announces itself when it's real. I think it just stays. And sometimes, late at night, when my phone lights up with a simple "Are you awake?" I realize the answer has been the same since the beginning. Yeah, I'm here. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?